A lone woman living on the edge of the Nevada wilderness offers a simple apple to a starving wild Mustang. The next morning, she wakes to insistent knocking at her door. What she discovers on her porch leaves her breathless and changes her life forever. Wildlife experts were stunned when they saw what this magnificent wild horse had brought her, something never before documented in the history of human-horse interaction. Scientists are now rushing to study this unprecedented phenomenon that challenges everything we thought we knew about wild animal intelligence and gratitude. You won't believe the incredible bond that formed from one small act of kindness and the miraculous thank you this wild Mustang delivered. Sarah Harmon pulled her battered pickup to a stop at the fence line, marking her small ranch's boundary. The summer drought had turned the Nevada foothills into a harsh landscape of dust and withered vegetation. As she stepped out to check her property's perimeter, movement caught her eye. A wild Mustang stood just beyond the fence, a magnificent pinto stallion with distinctive black and white markings. Even from a distance, Sarah could see his ribs protruding beneath his dull coat. The drought had pushed the wild herds into desperate circumstances. At 43, Sarah had spent most of her life in these mountains. Her small horse rescue operation survived on donations and her work as a wildlife photographer. Despite being aware of the regulations against interfering with wild horses, Sarah's compassion overshadowed her caution. "You're having a rough time, aren't you?" she said softly, reaching for the apple in her lunch bag. The Mustang's ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring at the scent. Wild horses typically maintain distance from humans, but hunger seemed to override the stallion's caution. He approached the fence, stopping several yards away. Sarah placed the apple on a fence post and backed away. "It's not much, but it might help." To her surprise, the horse approached once she was at a safe distance. With delicate precision, he took the apple, consuming it in quick bites. His dark eyes never left her, showing an intelligence that struck Sarah deeply. As a lifelong horsewoman, she recognized something unusual in this Mustang's gaze. Not just wildness, but a depth of perception that seemed almost human. When he finished, he remained by the fence, studying her with unmistakable intentionality. "I wish I could do more," Sarah told him. "The BLM should be bringing supplemental feed under these conditions." The stallion tossed his head, his black forelock falling across one eye. Then, with a soft, nickering sound unlike anything Sarah had heard from a wild horse, he turned and trotted away, disappearing over the ridge into protected Mustang territory. That evening, as Sarah edited wildlife photographs in her small ranch house, her thoughts kept returning to the encounter. 20 years of working with horses had taught her to recognize individual personalities and intelligence. But something about this pinto stallion's demeanor suggested more than typical equine awareness. "You're romanticizing," she told herself, as thunder rumbled in the distance. The forecast had promised potential rain, the first in nearly 2 months. Morning arrived with gentle rainfall on her metal roof. As Sarah filled her coffee mug, a sound cut through the rain's rhythm, a distinct, repeated knocking at her front. Indoor, living miles from her nearest neighbor, unexpected visitors were rare enough to raise concern. She approached cautiously, peering through the side window. What she saw caused her coffee mug to slip from her fingers, shattering on the floor. As she stared in disbelief, the Pinto Mustang stood on her porch, completely unrestrained, its coat slick with rain. He raised his hoof and deliberately knocked against her door once more. But it was what lay beside him that stopped Sarah's breath entirely. An object that could not have been brought by a wild horse, yet clearly had been delivered with unmistakable purpose. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Common sense warned against opening her door to a wild stallion, but instinct told her this situation defied normal protocols. Slowly she pulled the door open, maintaining the threshold. As a boundary, the Pinto Mustang stepped back, giving her space with what seemed like deliberate courtesy. His intelligent eyes remained fixed on her face as he nickered softly, the same unusual sound from yesterday. Sarah's attention moved to the object beside him. Partially covered in mud, but unmistakable in its manufactured origin, was a weathered leather saddlebag. Its straps were broken, suggesting it had been carried rather than worn, and one side was embossed with faded initials, nearly obscured by time and the elements. "How did you?" Sarah whispered, the question having no rational answer. The stallion pawed once at the porch, then used his muzzle to nudge the saddlebag toward her in a gesture impossible to misinterpret. He wanted her to take it. Moving carefully, Sarah stepped onto the porch and crouched to retrieve the mud-covered object. The Mustang remained still, watching her actions with focused attention. The saddlebag was heavy, its contents shifting as she lifted it. "Thank you," she said, feeling slightly foolish for speaking to him as she would a human, yet somehow certain. He understood. As if confirming her thought, the stallion dipped his head in a motion resembling a nod before backing several steps away. He remained at the edge of her porch, rain darkening his coat as he waited. Inside, Sarah placed the saddlebag on her kitchen table and carefully opened the weathered flap. The contents were wrapped in an oilcloth that had protected them from moisture. As she unwrapped it, Sarah gasped. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, several old photographs, and a small box containing what appeared to be gold nuggets and a weathered map. The journal's cover bore faded lettering, field notes of Dr. Thomas Blackwood, 1887. Sarah's hands shook as she gently opened the brittle pages. The handwriting was meticulous, detailing geological surveys in what was now protected Mustang territory. Tucked between pages were photographs showing a bearded man, alongside geological formations she recognized from nearby mountains. The map marked several locations with X's and annotations about mineral deposits. "This is a historical treasure," she whispered, understanding the significance. Dr. Blackwood was well known in local history, a geologist whose final expedition had vanished without a trace. Sparked an enduring mystery and several fruitless treasure hunts over the decades. A soft nickering reminded Sarah of her visitor. The Pinto stallion remained, watching through the open door with what seemed like expectancy. "How did you find—" "And this?" she asked, returning to the porch. The Mustang tossed his head, then turned to look toward the mountains where protected herds roamed, the same area marked on Blackwood's map. The intent was unmistakable. He was indicating the source. Sarah's mind raced with questions that had no rational answers. Wild horses might occasionally pick up human objects out of curiosity, but the deliberate delivery of historically significant artifacts suggested a level of understanding that defied conventional knowledge about equine cognition. "Would you show me?" she asked, hardly believing she was essentially asking a wild horse to lead her to a historical site. The stallion's response erased any doubt about his comprehension. He stepped back from the porch and waited, looking from Sarah to the direction of the mountains and back again with obvious intent. As rain continued falling gently, Sarah made a decision that would alter her understanding of wild horse intelligence and potentially rewrite a chapter of local history. "Let me get my gear," she said, turning back to gather essentials: her camera, water, the journal and map, and appropriate clothing. Through the window, she saw the Pinto stallion waiting patiently, occasionally glancing toward the mountains as if anxious to begin their journey. The rain tapered to a gentle mist as Sarah stepped outside, backpack secure and camera protected. The Pinto stallion remained where she'd last seen him, his attention sharpening as she appeared. "I'm ready," she said, still feeling slightly ridiculous for speaking to him as a guide, yet unable to deny the obvious intelligence in his gaze. The Mustang nickered softly, then turned toward an animal trail leading into protected territory. He paused after several steps, looking back as if to ensure she followed. Sarah hesitated at her property line, aware she was entering federally protected land. As a licensed wildlife photographer, she had permits for limited access, but following a wild horse on what felt increasingly like a treasure hunt certainly stretched those permissions. The stallion waited, his patience remarkable for a wild animal. When Sarah finally stepped across the boundary, he resumed walking, maintaining a pace she could match while following a route that seemed deliberate rather than random. "Do you have a name?" Sarah asked as they walked. "I need to call you something besides, 'Hey, you.'" The horse flicked an ear back toward her voice, but continued forward. After a moment's thought, Sarah decided, "I'm going to call you Finder. Seems appropriate." Finder led her along ridgelines and through shallow canyons that would have been difficult to navigate alone. The drought-parched landscape showed signs of revival from the morning's rainfall, with dry creek beds now hosting thin rivulets of water. 2 hours into their journey, they crested a rise that opened into a valley Sarah had never seen, despite her years exploring the region. The topography had hidden it perfectly, with high ridges creating a natural bowl, accessible only through a narrow pass. Finder paused, allowing Sarah to catch her breath and take in the view. Within the valley, a small band of wild horses grazed, on vegetation that seemed more abundant than in the surrounding areas. Water pooled in a natural basin, fed by what appeared to be a spring emerging from rocks at the valley's far end. "This is your home," Sarah realized. "Your family." The Mustangs looked up at their approach, but unlike typical wild horse behavior, they didn't scatter or show alarm. Instead, they observed with what appeared to be expectancy, as if Finder's return with a human was somehow anticipated. A white mare with a distinctive grey patch over one eye approached, greeting Finder before turning her attention to Sarah. The level of comfort these wild horses displayed around a human defied everything Sarah understood about Mustang behavior. "They know you brought me here deliberately," she said. "This isn't the first time your band has interacted with humans, is it?" As if answering, Finder moved toward the rocky formation at the valley's far end. Sarah followed, taking photographs. The spring emerging from the rocks created a small but steady flow of water, explaining how this band had survived the drought better than others. As they approached, Sarah noticed something that stopped her mid-step. Carved into the rock face, weathered by time but still visible, were initials, TB-187. "Thomas Blackwood," she whispered, pulling out the journal and a map. The location aligned perfectly with one of the marked spots. Finder pawed at the ground, near the base of the rocks, drawing Sarah's attention to what appeared to be a collapsed entrance of a small cave or mine. Fallen rocks and accumulated soil had nearly hidden it, but recent rainfall had caused erosion, revealing timbers beneath the debris. Sarah recalled regional stories about Blackwood's final expedition. The geologist had reportedly discovered significant gold, but disappeared before recording its exact location. "Is this what you wanted to show me?" she asked Finder, who stood watching her with those impossibly intelligent eyes. Sarah spent the night reviewing her photographs and examining Blackwood's journal in detail. The geologist's neat handwriting described his discovery of a secluded valley with remarkable characteristics, where he had established a small mining operation after finding promising gold deposits. More intriguing were his descriptions of interactions with the wild horses. The equines here display behaviors unlike any I have observed in their species. They approach with curiosity rather than fear, and seem to observe my activities with uncanny comprehension. In his final dated entry, Blackwood wrote, "The horses warn of the approaching storm before any cloud appears. Their insistence grows, more urgent each hour. I have decided to heed their apparent warning and secure the site until the weather passes." The journal ended there, leaving his disappearance unresolved. Historical records indicated he had never returned, with most assuming he perished in severe flash floods that swept through the region shortly after. In the morning, Sarah faced a difficult decision. The historical significance demanded proper reporting, yet she felt a powerful obligation to protect the unusual Mustang band that had revealed their secret. After careful consideration, she contacted Dr. Eleanor Voss, a respected archaeologist known for her sensitive approach to sites with both historical and natural significance. Sarah shared selected photographs but held back the full story, saying only that she had encountered it during permitted photography work. This appears to be Blackwood's lost site, Dr. Voss confirmed. The historical value is significant. I'd like to assemble a small team for a preliminary survey as soon as possible. The location is within protected Mustang territory, Sarah emphasized. There's a band living in the valley that would be disturbed by a large presence. We'll keep it minimal and follow all wildlife protocols, Dr. Voss assured her. Would 3 days from now work? Just myself and 2 research assistants. After confirming arrangements, Sarah returned to her porch, somehow unsurprised to find Finder waiting. The Pinto stallion had clearly traveled from the valley to her property independently, a distance of several miles through challenging terrain. We're going to have visitors to the valley, she told him, abandoning any pretense that this was an ordinary interaction. Very careful, respectful ones. Is that acceptable? Finder's response was to approach and gently rest his muzzle against her shoulder, a gesture of trust that moved Sarah deeply. She had worked with rescue horses for years, but had never experienced this level of immediate connection with a wild Mustang. I won't let anyone exploit your home, she promised. The site will be properly protected for both its historical value and as your territory. Over the next 2 days, Sarah made multiple visits to the valley, always accompanied by Finder. She documented the Mustang band's behaviors with the careful eye of someone trained in wildlife observation. Their comfort with human presence remained extraordinary, with even the youngest foals approaching with curious interest rather than fear. On the morning Dr. Voss was scheduled to arrive, Sarah waited at her property line. Finder had not appeared, which concerned her after his consistent presence over the previous days. As the researcher's SUV pulled up, Sarah's concern shifted to surprise. Alongside Dr. Voss and her assistants was a man in the uniform of the Bureau of Land Management, the agency responsible for wild horse oversight. Sarah spent the night reviewing her photographs and examining Blackwood's journal in detail. The geologist's neat handwriting described his discovery of a secluded valley with remarkable characteristics, where he had established a small mining operation after finding promising gold deposits. More intriguing were his descriptions of interactions with the wild horses. The equines here display behaviors unlike any I have observed in their species. They approach with curiosity rather than fear and seem to observe my activities with uncanny comprehension. In his final dated entry, Blackwood wrote, "The horses warn of the approaching storm before any cloud appears. Their insistence grows more urgent each hour. I have decided to heed their apparent warning and secure the site until the weather passes." The journal ended there, leaving his disappearance unresolved. Historical records indicated he had never returned, with most assuming he perished in severe flash floods that swept through the region shortly after. In the morning, Sarah faced a difficult decision. The historical significance demanded proper reporting, yet she felt a powerful obligation to protect the unusual Mustang band that had revealed their secret. After careful consideration, she contacted Dr. Eleanor Voss, a respected archaeologist, known for her sensitive approach to sites with both historical and natural significance. Sarah shared selected photographs but held back the full story, saying only that she had encountered it during permitted photography work. This appears to be Blackwood's lost site, Dr. Voss confirmed. The historical value is significant. I'd like to assemble a small team for a preliminary survey as soon as possible. The location is within protected Mustang territory, Sarah emphasized. There's a band living in the valley that would be disturbed by a large presence. We'll keep it minimal and follow all wildlife protocols, Dr. Voss assured her. Would 3 days from now work? Just myself and 2 research assistants. After confirming arrangements, Sarah returned to her porch, somehow unsurprised to find Finder waiting. The Pinto stallion had clearly traveled from the valley to her property independently, a distance of several miles through challenging terrain. "We're going to have visitors to the valley," she told him, abandoning any pretense that this was an ordinary interaction. "Very careful, respectful ones. Is that acceptable?" Finder's response was to approach and gently rest his muzzle against her shoulder, a gesture of trust that moved Sarah deeply. She had worked with rescue horses for years, but had never experienced this level of immediate connection with a wild Mustang. "I won't let anyone exploit your home," she promised. "The site will be properly protected, both for its historical value and as your territory." Over the next 2 days, Sarah made multiple visits to the valley, always accompanied by Finder. She documented the Mustang band's behaviors with the careful eye of someone trained in wildlife observation. Their comfort with human presence remained extraordinary, with even the youngest foals approaching with curious interest rather than fear. On the morning Dr. Voss was scheduled to arrive, Sarah waited at her property line. Finder had not appeared, which concerned her after his consistent presence over the previous days. As the researcher's SUV pulled up, Sarah's concern shifted to surprise. Alongside Dr. Voss and her assistants was a man in the uniform of the Bureau of Land Management, the agency responsible for wild horse oversight. "It's exactly as described in his later notes," Dr. Voss said, referencing documents beyond Blackwood's recovered journal, a verdant valley hidden from casual discovery. The research team established a preliminary survey operation, mapping the area and documenting evidence of Blackwood's presence. Mitchell's attention remained divided between the archaeological work and the horses, who had rejoined their larger band but continued observing from a nearby rise. "The collapsed entrance definitely indicates a mining tunnel," Dr. Voss confirmed after examining the site. "With proper equipment and permits, we could potentially explore what's beyond." As the researchers worked, Sarah found herself drawn to a section of the rock face she hadn't examined closely before, weathered by time and partially obscured by vegetation. The surface bore faint markings that appeared deliberate rather than natural. "Dr. Voss," she called, "I think you should see this." The archaeologist approached, her expression shifting to intense focus. "These are petroglyphs," she confirmed, carefully clearing away the obscuring vegetation, "and they predate Blackwood by centuries." The images revealed themselves, stylized renderings of horses alongside human figures arranged in patterns suggesting narratives rather than simple representations. "This changes everything," Dr. Voss breathed. "This valley wasn't just Blackwood's discovery. It has a much longer history of human-horse interaction." Mitchell joined them, his professional demeanor giving way to genuine wonder. "These images are remarkably similar to documented horse petroglyphs from indigenous cultures throughout the Great Basin," he noted, "but the style is distinctive." More remarkable was what happened next. As they documented the ancient artwork, Finder approached, stopping a respectful distance from the humans. With deliberate movements, he pawed at the ground beneath the petroglyphs, then looked directly at Sarah. Following his indication, Sarah knelt and carefully brushed away the surface soil, revealing a smooth stone, unlike the surrounding rocks. As she cleared more earth, the object's shape became clear, a stone bowl clearly shaped by human hands, with figures similar to the petroglyphs carved around its rim. "This is an extraordinary artifact," Dr. Voss said, carefully photographing it without touching it. "It appears to be a ceremonial vessel, possibly used for water or food offerings." "The horse led you directly to it," Mitchell observed, his tone indicating reassessment. "That's not random behavior." "No," Sarah agreed, looking at Finder, whose intelligent gaze held hers steadily. "It's deliberate communication." As the afternoon progressed, the research team documented their findings, while Sarah observed the increasingly clear patterns of interaction between the Mustang band and humans. The horses maintained distance, but watched with unmistakable attention, occasionally approaching specific areas as if indicating points of interest. "What we're witnessing challenges fundamental assumptions about Mustang behavior," Mitchell acknowledged. "This band appears to have maintained knowledge of this valley's significance across generations." "Not just knowledge," Dr. Voss added thoughtfully. "What we're seeing suggests cultural transmission, the passing of specific information through a social group over time. That's exceptionally rare to document in non-human species." As they gathered equipment, Sarah noticed Finder approaching once more. The Pinto stallion carried something in his mouth, a small, weathered piece of wood that he deliberately placed at her feet before backing away. Sarah carefully lifted the object, recognizing it as a fragment of carved wood shaped by human hands. One surface bore faded lettering that, when cleaned carefully, revealed partial words: "Seed's Claw, Blackwood's Claim." Dr. Voss translated, "This appears to be part of a claim marker, what miners would use to designate their legal mining territory." 3 months later, Sarah stood at the entrance to the hidden valley, watching as Finder led his band across the autumn-kissed landscape. The air carried hints of winter, but the valley remained protected and verdant. Beside her, Carson Mitchell reviewed data on his tablet. "The research permit framework is working exactly as designed," he reported. "Limited human presence, full protection of both the archaeological sites and the Mustang habitat." Sarah nodded, satisfaction warming her despite the chill air. The battle to protect the valley had transformed into an unprecedented collaborative stewardship program, one that recognized both the historical significance of the site and the extraordinary nature of its equine guardians. The turning point had come when footage of the Mustang's remarkable behavior went viral, generating public pressure that even determined mining interests couldn't overcome. Scientists from multiple disciplines petitioned for special protected status, arguing that the Mustang band represented a unique cultural phenomenon, deserving preservation in their natural habitat. "The latest cognitive studies are remarkable," Mitchell continued. "The band shows problem-solving abilities and social structures far more complex than previously documented in equines. Dr. Voss believes they've been selectively breeding for intelligence over multiple generations." The archaeological work had revealed that the valley had been a sacred site for indigenous peoples long before Blackwood's arrival. The ancient petroglyphs told stories of a special relationship between humans and horses, one that predated European settlement of the region. Most remarkable was the discovery beneath the collapsed mine entrance. When carefully excavated under Dr. Voss's supervision, it revealed not just Blackwood's small mining operation, but a natural cave system containing artifacts spanning centuries, suggesting the valley had long been a place where humans and horses shared a unique connection. The universities proposed naming the site Harmony Valley in their official documentation, Mitchell said. "Seems fitting." Sarah smiled, watching as Finder broke away from his band to approach her. The extraordinary Pinto stallion still maintained his wild nature, never allowing himself to be haltered or confined. But his trust in Sarah had deepened into a partnership, unlike anything documented in wildlife studies. The most valuable discovery wasn't gold or artifacts, she reflected as Finder reached her. It was proof that wild animals can choose to communicate with us if we're willing to listen. Since that dramatic morning when the Mustangs had placed themselves under her protection, Sarah's small ranch had been designated an official wildlife observation station. The research cabin on her property now hosted rotating teams of scientists studying the remarkable cognitive abilities of the Mustang band, while strict protocols ensured minimal human impact on their behavior. Finder touched his muzzle gently to Sarah's palm, their established greeting. In the months since their first encounter, he had continued bringing her small objects from the valley. Not just historical artifacts now, but items seemingly chosen for their beauty or uniqueness. Each gift reinforced their extraordinary bond, challenging conventional understanding of the barrier between domestic and wild. As Sarah walked back with Mitchell, she reflected on how much had changed from the moment she had offered an apple to a hungry wild horse. One small gesture had revealed an extraordinary truth, one that would influence wildlife conservation for generations, that the relationship between humans and wild animals could transcend traditional boundaries when approached with respect and openness, and each morning Sarah would still wake to the sound of hooves on her porch. A wild Mustang who had chosen to bridge the gap between worlds, bringing gifts more precious than gold. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Share it with someone who appreciates the special bond that can form between humans and animals when we approach with kindness and respect. The most extraordinary connections begin with the simplest acts of compassion.